So welcome back to another episode of the Property Sourcing Success Show, which is the only sourcing podcast across Ireland and the UK that shows up every week to give you bite-sized, simple and actionable steps that you can physically take and implement into your portfolio building business, your sourcing business today, tomorrow, ASAP. So what I want to talk to you about today, guys, is really that one thing that you need to start scaling up your portfolio building business, to start scaling up your sourcing business. And you'll often hear me when we have the podcast, or if I'm talking online, if I'm sending you out our daily blogs, I intertwine the term property sourcing, portfolio building and deal packaging. Don't be confused. They are not different strategies. They are all just a different name for the same fucking thing. So don't get confused with that. But here's the reality, guys. Property sourcing is viewed by many in the industry as a quick buck route to a life of riches and to that laptop lifestyle, to the frozen margaritas on the beach with the laptop just in shot for that Instagram picture. The harsh truth lies, guys, in the fact that all the idiots who believe this to be true, almost none of them will go on to achieve any level of success in sourcing because they did not see the results with immediate effect. So in other words, I often refer to that as the McDonald's effect. And because they didn't see the results in that fast food type of way, of that instant kind of gratification, they threw the towel in. However, for those with a more sensible, a more realistic approach as to what it actually takes to start, to grow and to scale a profitable sourcing business, well, they then tend to go on and do very, very well, generating 6 figures plus a year, because they did not buy into the shiny penny, the get rich quick mantra that is frankly slurred shamelessly across social media. So what I really want to do in today's short podcast episode is I want to talk to you, and I want to essentially show you how to become one of the 6-figure business owners with portfolio building businesses. And the sky's the limit from that point. There are other frameworks and infrastructures and processes and systems that you will have to put in place to ensure that the business doesn't break once you start to surpass that 6-figure mark. But today I want to talk to you about that one thing you need to put in place to get there. So we're talking £120,000 per year in sourcing fees plus. When I first started, when I dipped my toes in the water of property coming up to 8 years ago, it was through the medium of sourcing. I was completely and utterly wet behind the ears. Literally, I was the greenest rookie that you had ever encountered. I was a financial analyst, city girl, desperately trying to shake off the corporate shackles. And I know that a lot of you guys listening to the podcast, I know a lot of you in our community here at Property Sourcing Made Simple have some form of corporate shackle tied around you. I know because I've spoken to a lot of you. And frankly, those corporate shackles were making me absolutely miserable. I had no property experience. I didn't own any investment properties. I had no cash of our own to invest. That is a story for another day. And a lot of you will have heard me talk at one point in time about our backstory, but I'll do another podcast episode on that at another stage. Long story short, we'd no money. We'd no cash to invest. I had zero property education because I had no money to invest in training. Again, a story for another day. I had no property contacts. In short, I was completely out of my depth, like Titanic style out of my depth. I actually started in the sourcing world essentially as a sinking ship. But despite that very, very amateur start, inside my first 13 months of sourcing, I generated 6 figures in fees and have since gone on to raise well over 3 million in private investor funding and acquire a multi-million pounds property portfolio. Alert, 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 alert. That's not me trying to sound like a dick. That's not me trying to brag by any stretch of the imagination. I am still a long way from where I want to go. I'm a million miles away from where I want to be. And there are people who have achieved much, much more than me. But my point in telling you that kind of brief backstory is to highlight the fact that if I can do it from that sinking ship Titanic start, anyone can do it. Caveat, with the right work ethic and the right plan in place. And I'm going to be very, very, very clear and honest with you now. If you're lazy, if you're here because you think that you will get rich in the next 4 weeks, then you should tune off, you should turn me off, you should leave the community, you should unsubscribe from my daily newsletters, because that is not true. And I don't want you in our community if that is what you genuinely believe to be true. That might sound harsh. I really don't care. It's the truth. Here's the thing. Everything is not a deal, okay? So despite the cries online that if the deal is good enough, the money will follow. And I know that if you're listening to this back, you will likely be nodding your head at some point in time, because we've all heard it touted online. They coach this, they teach this, they tell you this, that if the deal is good enough, the money will follow. Well, I am here on this podcast today to categorically tell you that that is simply not true. And it is a surefire way to ruin your sourcing business, to drive it into the ground by having offers accepted on deals with no bona fide buyer in place to act with speed. And I know that many of you listening to this back, whether you're tuning in live, you're listening to it in the car, on a replay, you will know this pain. You will have been in this position at one point in time. So let me be very clear. A serious and a professional investor will pay you a sourcing fee based on the value that you are offering them. And value for each investor comes in different forms. So for some, it's the drive and it's the focus on discounted deals. Just a side note, I hate these investors, just saying. Hate them. Has to be 25% below market deal. Has to be. But to another investor, the value comes from providing them a portfolio building services that sources, that negotiates, that carries the deal through conveyancing, that closes the deal, and has that longer term wealth investment assessment always in their back of their mind. Now, I love these investors, and that's where my initial 6 figures came from. Those type of investors. So side note, spoiler alert, find people like that. So the key to scaling your sourcing business, guys, is to build a database of grade A investors. So the type of investor who doesn't pick over every last penny. The type of investor who doesn't try to discount your fee and ultimately discount your value. So the type of investor who sees the bigger picture longer term, who values what you are doing for them from a convenience point of view, for speed. So how do you do that? Well, it's actually rather simple. So you focus on what your area can actually offer. So your investment patch, your quote unquote gold mine area. And what you do is you focus on what they can provide, and you don't overpromise. You don't promise the moon, you don't promise the stars. To use my experience as an example, I knew that my area was littered with 2-bed mid-terrace properties in strong rental demand areas with a yield of 8% and sometimes higher. So I went really balls to the walls heavy on finding investors who wanted exactly that. Cheap note, a good place to look for these types of investors is actually your local landlord association meetings and members clubs. It's filled with old school portfolio landlords who are still actively buying. That's a really valuable tip. If you don't take that and run with it, you're stupid. So once you have that aspect nailed, then it's time to install systems and make the business as passive as it possibly can be. Now, there are 100 different apps, there's software, there are platforms that I could recommend to streamline the systemization of your sourcing business. And I'm not going to bore you with it, frankly. Why, Danielle? Why are you not going to tell us? Well, the key to streamlining your sourcing business is actually more than a CRM system and a Podio form. The actual key to scaling your property business, guys, is people. Cliche, but true. You will need someone who can do the admin. You will need someone who can manage your inbox. You will need someone who can provide updates to investors, solicitors, to agents without you being chased and hounded. Now, I have to admit, it took me a long time to admit that I needed to employ someone to help me. Again, breaking it back and stripping it back. The breaking point for me came when I was unexpectedly admitted into hospital in 2019 with severe pneumonia. Despite being rather ill, really rather ill at that time, I found myself being chased, being hounded, sometimes harassed by builders, by agents and investors for updates on projects. But I was I was wiped out. I was off the grid. I was in hospital for the guts of a week. And then I had like 6-7 weeks post-recovery at home. I was completely off my feet. So you'll perhaps want to hire an ad hoc viewings assistant. Someone who can conduct the lower level income tasks. This is important. That frees you up to focus on the real money making, which is, by the way, investor lead generation, investor calls, submitting offers, overseeing projects. The single best hire that I made in my business was our head of operations. Okay, so someone who essentially acts as a gatekeeper to me, and they protect my time to ensure that I can focus on the priority tasks, which for me will always be finding the money, raising the money, finding the deals. That is my priority task. That is your income generating tasks. Finding money, finding deals. That's going to boost your cash flow. That's going to boost your wealth generation. That's going to boost your asset base. And that is all that you should be focused with. All the lower level tasks, the admin, you need to have a gatekeeper in there. 100%. Once you have that in place, then you can actually allow yourself the location freedom that we all dream about. You know, very content in the knowledge that you've actually built a structure via systems and via processes and via people that allows your business to run even when you don't. Honestly, it was a super harsh lesson for me to learn from a hospital bed, you know, and I suppose the silver lining from that stint in hospital and from that illness was actually it allowed me the time then to put these systems in place to make sure that my business was never at risk of grinding to a halt ever again. So don't be fooled, guys, by the fact that you can create this model overnight. It takes time, right? When you have this in place, you can take your time off. Yes, you can travel. Yes, you can still run your business. Yes, you can take an additional week at Christmas with the kids. Yes, you can take an additional week during the summer holidays with the kids. Yes, you can have the sick days with the kids. Yes, you can go and visit people as and when you want because you have that, I suppose, location freedom. But that doesn't happen overnight. That model is not created overnight. It takes time. It takes persistence. And it actually takes the ability to ask for help when you hit a roadblock. But it can be done if you are prepared to go the longer mile with it. Will you do it in 3 months? No. Can you do it in 12? Yes. So if you want the fast food McDonald's approach and you want this location freedom and time freedom back into your life and that flexibility, if you think you can do it in the next 8 weeks, it's not going to happen. But if you can take a longer term vision and say, can I do this inside 12 months? Can I do this inside 18? The answer is absolutely fucking yes. Absolutely yes. It can be done if I can do it. And I was really terrible when I started 8 years ago, but you absolutely can do this. Okay. So hopefully this has been helpful. You know that typically speaking, we like to keep these episodes to no more than 15 minutes because I want them to be short, sharp, actionable, bite-sized, but most of all, I really want you to implement. If this has been useful, let me know in the comments below and I will be back next Thursday with another episode of the Property Source of Success Show. Have a great weekend, guys.